All right, I will now turn this webinar over to Chloe Marie, our research specialist, who will present a roundup of this quarter's dairy legal developments. Chloe, the screen's all yours.
Thank you, Adrienne. Welcome, everyone. So today we'll start with recent USDA initiatives to support dairy businesses and innovation. Then we'll move on to the latest updates to federal milk marketing orders and changes in milk pricing. Next, we'll discuss new federal requirements for raw milk testing related to HPAI. And we will also cover the FDA's revised definition of healthy food labels. We will touch on the FDA's priorities for dairy safety in the upcoming fiscal year before concluding with a recent legal case involving milk marketing protections and student speech. And finally, we'll review Pennsylvania's new bulk milk testing order for HPAI. So to begin, let's review some recent updates from the USDA. So on October 4, 2024, the USDA announced $11 million in funding to support dairy businesses and producers through the Dairy Business Innovation Initiatives. This program is about helping dairy producers grow by supporting product development, marketing, and distribution, especially for niche products such as specialty cheese. It also provides hands-on guidance in business strategy, marketing, and product innovation. The grants will be allocated non-competitively to 4 DBI initiatives led by the California State University of Fresno, the University of Tennessee, the Vermont Agency of Agriculture, Food and Markets, and the University of Wisconsin. At least half of the funding goes towards sub-awards that help farms modernize, improve grazing practices, and develop new high-value dairy products. Next, we will look at some changes to milk pricing. On December 2, 2024, the USDA Agricultural Marketing Service published their final recommendations on proposed updates to the milk pricing formulas used across all 11 federal milk marketing orders. The FMMO system, which has been in place for nearly a decade, is designed to regulate how milk is priced in different regions. However, following a drop in demand for dairy products, producers found themselves dealing with surpluses and falling prices. So in response to the industry concerns, the USDA kicked off a formal review process in August 2023. They narrowed it down to 5 key recommendations for updating the system. First, the USDA wants to adjust the standard milk compositions percentages used for pricing, raising them to 3.3% for protein, 6% for other solids, and 9.3% for non-fat solids. Then they want to change how cheese prices are calculated. Right now, the system, the prices are tied to wholesale dairy prices, including cheese. And the current method averages prices for both 40-pound blocks and 500-pound barrels of cheddar. The new proposal would only use 40-pound blocks to determine the monthly average cheese price. The USDA also wants to revise make allowances. So these allowances represent the cost of turning raw milk into dairy product. And the USDA wants to update them to reflect current processing costs and adjust the butterfat recovery rate to 91%. They also would like to bring back the higher half pricing method. So to set the base price for skim milk in fluid milk products, the USDA proposes returning to the higher half Class 3 or Class 4 prices. They also suggest adding a new adjustment for extended shelf life milk products to ensure fair pricing. And finally, they want to adjust location-based price differences. So the USDA plans to keep the base adjustment at $1.60, but update the specific price values for different regions to better reflect shifts in the dairy industry. So this final decision largely follows the previous recommendations made on July 15, 2024, but includes some changes that were made in response to public comments and further review of the evidence. So first, instead of taking 12 months to implement revised skim milk composition factors, the timeline has been reduced to 6 months. A small additional cost has been included in the calculation of milk allowances. Third, the method for calculating non-fat dry milk cost has been adjusted. And finally, some county-specific price differences for Class 1 milk have been slightly changed. The USDA also announced that dairy producers had the opportunity to vote on these changes through a referendum for each of the 11 federal milk marketing orders, with a deadline of January 15, 2025. And with at least 2/3 voting in favor, the final rule was published on January 17, 2025. So I won't be covering this rule in detail during today's webinar, but I wanted to flag it for you as we'll be discussing it in our next session. Now let's discuss a new requirement related to raw milk testing. On December 6, 2024, the USDA issued a new federal order requiring the nationwide collection of raw milk samples for HPAI testing. Brooke will cover this in more detail later, but I just want to touch on it briefly before we continue. So the order requires that dairy farms, milk transporters, transfer stations, and processing facilities must allow the agency to collect raw milk samples for testing when requested. Laboratories and state veterinarians are required to report any positive HPAI results in livestock, including raw milk, to USDA. And herd owners with HPAI positive milk must submit epidemiological and animal movement data to the USDA. This order does not replace the April 24, 2024 federal order, which still requires testing for all dairy cattle moving across state lines and reporting positive results. So the first round of testing began on December 16, 2024. And additionally, the USDA kicked off the National Milk Testing Strategy, which is a detailed 5-stage plan meant to ensure U.S. dairy cattle remain free from HPAI. Now, moving on, the FDA recently made updates to the definition of healthy for food labeling. On December 27, 2024, they published a final rule. So let's take a quick look at what has changed. So for a product to be considered healthy or use any related terms like healthier or healthiest, it must meet 2 criteria. First, the product must contain a specified amount from at least one of the recommended food groups or subgroups, and dairy is recognized as one of the 6 main food groups alongside vegetables, fruits, grain, protein foods, and oils. And to qualify, a dairy product must provide at least 2/3 cup equivalent of dairy. And second, the product also needs to meet certain limits for added sugars, saturated fat, and sodium. For dairy, the rules are as follows. Added sugars must be no more than 5% of the daily value. Sodium must be no more than 10% of the daily value. And for saturated fat, it must be no more than 10% of the daily value. Now fat-free and low-fat dairy products automatically qualify for the healthy label. This means they don't have to meet the specific limits for added sugar, saturated fat, or sodium, as long as they contain no added ingredients other than water. Next, the FDA's Human Foods Program outlined its priorities for fiscal year 2025. One of the key areas they will focus on is dairy product safety. To do this, the FDA is teaming up with the USDA, the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, the National Conference on Interstate Milk Shipments, and state agencies to assess whether HPAI poses any risk to human health through milk. Now, shifting gears to legal case, the USDA milk marketing protection rules were recently challenged in court. So in this case, Marielle Williamson, a high school student, wanted to educate her classmates about the negative aspects of dairy consumption. She planned to set up a table during lunch, handing out materials on health concerns, environmental impact, and the influence of the dairy industry. She sought permission from the school administration. The school agreed only if she also handed out pro-dairy materials alongside her critical materials because of federal policies tied to the National School Lunch Program. So under the milk marketing protection rules, schools cannot restrict the sale or marketing of milk, meaning dairy can be promoted anywhere on campus, and schools are required to offer milk to their students. Students can only get a non-dairy substitute if a doctor confirms they have a disability that prevents them from drinking milk. For other dietary reasons, schools may allow substitutes if a parent or medical professional requested in writing. And the USDA enforces these rules and can fine schools for non-compliance. Now, Mariel and some advocacy groups argue that these rules effectively silence criticism of dairy. She said the school violated her First Amendment rights and pointed out the double standards. Schools can promote dairy without restrictions, but if you criticize it, you have to present the other side. So the USDA filed a motion to dismiss the case, arguing that Mariel and the other plaintiffs did not have the legal standing to sue. On November 30, 2024, the court ultimately ruled against Mariel, concluding that because Mariel has since graduated, her claims are moot in federal court. However, the court highlighted that even if the school restricted her speech, she was suing the USDA, not the school, and she cannot sue the USDA over what her school did. Additionally, Mariel could not show that the milk marketing protections rules would actually be enforced against students. Mariel argued that the rules apply not just to schools, but also to anyone the school approves, and that her fear of punishment led to self-censorship, which is a legal injury. The court acknowledged that self-censorship could be a valid concern, but only if there was a clear proof of a real and immediate risk of enforcement, which the plaintiffs failed to show. And finally, on November 20, 2024, the Pennsylvania Department of Agriculture issued a new order that requires all milk from Pennsylvania farms to be tested for HPAI effective immediately. So here is a quick overview of that slide of the details surrounding this order. Milk processors receiving milk in Pennsylvania and dairy farms sending milk to out-of-state processors must submit samples for testing no later than November 26, 2024. Samples from each milk tanker must be collected from every farm on each pickup route at least once every 2 weeks, and the initial samples can be spread out over the first 14 days following November 26. Samples need to be sent in within 48 hours, either by hand delivery or mailed to a nearby Pennsylvania Animal Diagnostic Lab. And if any farm tests positive, it will be quarantined and a zone around it will be marked as infected. Dairy herds in that zone will need to submit milk samples regularly for testing, and the department will continue monitoring and testing in the area until the zone is lifted. So that concludes today's dairy roundup developments. And